Paper Mario Color Splash, the fifth entry in the Paper Mario series, following up the largely disliked Sticker Star. Despite maintaining several of that game's weaknesses, Color Splash is a vast improvement, and is overall a much more inspired adventure. While its originality and combat are still lacking, the creativity of the writing and scenarios make this a very easy to enjoy experience. Color Splash is always introducing entertaining new ideas. That's not to say they're all successes though, and truthfully, a lot of people who don't care for Sticker Star don't care for Color Splash for similar reasons. In this video, I'm going to lay out what I found to be the best and the worst aspects of this game. Be warned that full spoilers for Paper Mario Color Splash are on the table. The best. Number 1, improving on Sticker Star. Even though Color Splash continues the restrictive character and enemy design from Sticker Star, it's still bursting with creativity thanks to just how inventive story and level concepts are. The overarching narrative's been improved. It's present throughout the whole game now, helping the journey feel a lot more meaningful. That's not to say it's deep. It's really just a setup to get things going, but it presents compelling ideas to make the most of the rather played out Mario elements. The concept of Shy Guys sucking color out of the environment, which also stops things from working, is a novel premise. Even toads are drained, kind of temporarily killing them. This creates an unsettling vibe and sense of urgency right from the get-go, and it's all centered around the paint motif perfectly, a far more appealing theme than stickers. This world's a lot more active, and places feel believable. Despite almost every NPC being a generic toad, they're characterized well, and a few of them even undergo their own story arcs. Princess Peach actually hangs out for a bit at the start, which helps her feel more like a real character, and only gets kidnapped after rescuing the first big paint star. Bowser's talking again, and although his dialogue's brief and doesn't have much substance, it's at least a step in the right direction. Like Sticker Star, this game also tries for an emotional moment at the end, but it works a lot better here, since Huey's one of the most likable partners the series has seen, and his sacrifice feels meaningful. As formulaic as a lot of this narrative is, it's still so much more ambitious than anything Sticker Star tried. This is a more satisfying experience on the gameplay side as well. Levels are more intricate and interactive in their design. They don't rely nearly as much on spamming enemies to fill space, and it helps that enemies are also easier to avoid. Battles actually give something unique for your efforts now too. Hammer scraps that increase the amount of paint you can hold. This is appreciated so they don't feel completely pointless, but it's not quite enough for them to actually be worth seeking out. Combat suffers from several design choices brought over from Sticker Star, which I'll talk about more later, but the system has been improved in multiple ways. Fights are generally less time-consuming than they were in Sticker Star. It's so easy to stay loaded up on overpowered cards that most fights are breezy and brain-dead. The battle spinner's been redesigned as more of a benefit instead of being linked to an essential battle component, which is a smart decision. Things have been greatly streamlined since they can now be used immediately, and card space is rarely an issue. Knowing what things you'll need going forward's easy now too, thanks to a know-it-all Toad who gives you obvious hints about what to carry around, making it more about figuring out when to use them. He's not the most elegant solution to integrating things smoothly, but he helps reduce roadblocks and backtracking a lot. Sticker Star's atrocious super flags have been graciously overhauled and are actually normal challenges now, for the most part. Instead of grindy bullshit to pad out the playtime, with the exception of the Rochambeau temples, these new banners are easy to complete during a playthrough. For example, 200 excellent attacks is worlds more reasonable than the 1000 Sticker Star wanted. And finally, completing the museum has a much better reward this time around. Wonderful concept artwork showing how the world was conceptualized in the paper style, as well as cut character designs. I've really only covered the basics so far. There's a lot more this game does better. Number 2, ideas and surprises. You never know what to expect in this game. Most levels have their own narrative and setting, and they're not afraid to introduce entirely new ways of playing, for better or worse. Not every level's the best time, but they're mostly engaging, interesting places to explore. Surprises are a big strength of Color Splash. It's easy to see them as distractions from the game's flaws, but they're not to be undervalued. This feels like an adventure because so many things happen in so many different places. The dark blue inns the most well-known set piece, a quiet hotel plagued with ghosts you have to help out one by one to return things to normal. It's cool, original, has a nice sense of atmosphere, satisfying puzzles, and a great sense of humor. It's rightfully the standout level of the game. Fort Cobalt's also really up there. A military base out of Metal Gear Solid and incredibly out of the ordinary for the Mario series. But you wouldn't know that with how well it works out here. Tangerino Grill gets credit for its authenticity. A steakhouse-like restaurant where you have to cook for disgruntled patrons is one heck of a novelty. And I'm just skimming the surface. The green energy plant's a surprising throwback to Super Mario Bros. 3. The expedition to Fortune Island has you navigating a foggy sea and bouncing between parallel worlds that alter one another. You even follow a train along its final journey, piecing it back together after an unfortunate accident and reclaiming it from hijackers as it rockets across the sunset. The huge forest, the itty-bitty forest, the chain-chomp chariots, getting kidnapped and thrown in jail by Sniffits, performing in a circus, fighting a steak, even traveling through a pipe and all of a sudden entering a battle. Color Splash is constantly presenting inspired ideas and surprises, and is a whole lot of fun because of that. Number 3, fun gameplay. This game's just really fun to play. Exploring levels, coloring in the terrain, finding secrets, and collecting cards is also satisfying. As rudimentary as a lot of it is when you really break it down, it's fun to do thanks to effective feedback, like the splatting impact of the paint hammer. Scouring levels for one deviously hidden colorless spot's a lot more enthralling than you'd think. Smashing the world around you to refill paint isn't something you need to resort to often, but the realistic way the world reacts to your hammer makes this fun to do. Squeezing things is also satisfying just because of how it's presented. The adventure game formula Sticker Star introduced works a lot better here, thanks to the streamlining I mentioned earlier. The first quote-unquote chapter feels empowering since you can find the chosen toads in any order. Figuring out where to go and how to progress is what makes the problem-solving format of adventure games so fulfilling. Interesting problems are constantly set up for you to find solutions to. Sometimes you'll head someplace new just to grab something and won't come back for some time, and this helps the world feel more interconnected. Solutions aren't always handed to you either. The game trusts you to figure things out yourself more than a few times, like discovering a place to use cutout or noticing something small in the environment. Separating levels with an overworld map makes backtracking quick and painless, and this brings me to another strength of Color Splash: how much the game lets you play it. It certainly has interruptions, but control's never taken away for long. It's a very engaging pace. Dialogue is nicely balanced, giving a lot of personality and information with little words. This all makes for an effortlessly enjoyable game, and aside from some gimmicky moments, it's a very inviting experience. Number 4, a charming presentation. For anyone who loves vibrant visuals, the aptly named Color Splash does not disappoint. This game is gorgeous, not only bursting with color, but also utilizing the paper aesthetic on a whole new level for the series, creating a world that truly feels crafted together. Each location's aesthetically interesting, with all sorts of unique terrain and design so everything looks made of paper. The way things fold out and connect to each other, Mario's paper form subtly flapping in the breeze, even the water looks fantastic sticking to the paper style. It's a masterful execution of the motif. Interiors more than ever give the feeling of looking into a dollhouse, and are really cozy. There are also a lot of backgrounds during combat. They almost always portray fights from exactly where you entered them, so they never feel like you're cutting away from the world. A lot of in-game events play with the style in creative ways. Unfurling in particular is fun to do just because of how eye-catching its effects are. Color Splash continuously presents things in ways so that it's just more fun. For example, when receiving a mountain climbing permit, it comes out of a flat safe in the floor, when it could have just been handed to you. The dance sequences after each big paint star are another example of the game going out of its way just to be fun. They each even have their own music. It's creativity for its own sake. This paper world's just so packed with charm. Color Splash has a solid soundtrack. I wouldn't say there are a lot of must-listen-to pieces, but very few of them are duds. Overall, this is a spectacular presentation. Even the loading screens look nice, and the ending credit parade also deserves a shout-out. Number 5, humor and writing. This series is known for having a great sense of humor, The Thousand-Year Door and Super Paper Mario in particular. Going back to those titles today though, not all of the humor holds up. Several of their jokes are dated or especially especially low-brow. Color Splash's humor is a lot more clever, easily making this the funniest title in the series so far. Nearly every interaction presents something humorous. This game literally made me laugh out loud multiple times, and that's not easy to do. For some examples, disgruntled Toad patrons taking out their frustration on Mario in battle form. A giant chain chomp pet named Princess cuddling with her doting Toad owner. The airship Bowser runs often is taped together, showing you it's the one you blew up earlier. It was only used again to make it funny, and it is. Huey's a great partner for comedy thanks to his strong opinions and expressive reactions. He's one of the most charismatic partners the series has seen. The game even presents several moments between him and Mario that exist just to endear you to their relationship. The script's consistently entertaining because it's just so refined. This is one of those games where it's completely worth seeking out every bit of optional dialogue you can, and proves to me you don't need original characters to still be entertained. The Koopalings show up for the first time in the Paper Mario series, and are surprisingly really well suited to it. It's fun to see these characters fleshed out for a change. They have really interesting personalities. I have to mention the fairly famous train scene where Mario talks to a Shy Guy about his lot in life being one of Bowser's minions. It's not a long interaction, but an endearing one for showing a different perspective. He even says you'll likely meet again somewhere down the road, as enemies in a random battle, like any other Shy Guy. And wouldn't you know it, this even has a payoff, when after just another fight, a Shy Guy takes a brief moment to remind you who he is, before crumpling away. Dang bro, what a lovely little inclusion so you feel things. And shout out to Luigi for showing up just before the finish line to play the cool role of carting you over Rainbow Road. Glad to see him play more of a part in this one. Despite how limited the originality of Color Splash's world and characters are, it's incredible how creative and entertaining it manages to be anyway. But alas, there is another side to this game. After all, Color Splash is often seen as an improvement over Sticker Star that still has a lot of flaws. But do its flaws hamper the experience as much as that game's did? Let's jump into it. The worst. Number 1, a sterilized Mario world. I've pretty much pointed this out already, and it's one of the biggest continuing weaknesses from Sticker Star, the reduction of originality being replaced by typical Mario-themed elements. This world's, thankfully, more inspired than Sticker Star's, but it's still almost entirely inhabited by basic male Toads. No female variants, no kids, no other Mario races outside of the offhand basic enemy types with some dialogue, like Shy Guys, Sniffits, Goombas, and Koopas, but don't expect them to have any kind of visual distinction or flair. Speaking of enemy types, they've also all been seen before. A few rarely seen ones were included, like Dino Rhinos, but otherwise don't expect much beyond the most standard of Super Mario foes. Like I said before, the story's a much more successful attempt than Sticker Star's, but is still really basic, and because of that, it treats things like Peach's letters and the big Paint Star memories like they're conveying anything of importance, but it's all very standard. It's obvious how everything went down from the get-go, but it pretends there's depth here with these scenes when it's all very predictable. This is a step up from Sticker Star, but these are baby steps, and there's still a long way to go to present a fresh world of unique faces. Number 2, combat design. While this battle system's more enjoyable than Sticker Star's, it still has a lot of issues. Battles are still largely unrewarding, since hammer scraps are the only special thing you get from them. And since it's rare to even run out of paint, upgrading how much you can carry is really just a nice perk. Targeting enemies is still restricted to attacking them in order, so you need to know how every move will behave to fight efficiently. Using cards is pretty tedious, asking you to select each one, paint them, and flick them up for every action. The advanced control options make this a lot smoother and really should be the default setup, but what really drags the card selection down is how they're organized when you sort them. Rifling through a long list for every battle is time-consuming, and cards can only be sorted in one order, which puts your healing options up first, while putting essential things like the basic jump and hammer cards over to the left. In most fights, you'll have to scroll for a bit just to select the most commonly used actions. It practically de-incentivizes sorting since it makes battles longer and more irritating. Attacks are also still disposable, meaning you'll sometimes waste waste cards when you didn't need to. While things are easier to time in boss fights, a few fights are still pretty easy to mess up by using something too early. Iggy, Larry, and Lemmy are some of the more notable offenders, and unlike in Sticker Star, messing up the proper use of a thing will lead to certain death. You need to use them at the right time to win these battles. Finally, this is another unsatisfying final boss. Better than Sticker Stars, but still cheap and frustrating. This fight relies on proper guard timing to win, but being expected to guard moves you're seeing for the first time with very harsh punishments for messing up makes this an infuriating final note to end the game on. Bowser's last breath moves especially bad-mannered since it looks like it's hitting before it actually does. And since failing the guard command invalidates every card you used the previous turn, you can waste all of your best options when you're still learning the timing. This fight can blindside you in several ways, bringing down the experience right at the end. Number 3, Comic Curse Battles. This is, plain and simple, aggravating game design. The idea of Comic randomly appearing in battles to change your options has potential on paper, possibly giving you an on-the-spot challenge to defeat the enemies with what you're left with. But man, did they not curate these, as there are literally unwinnable combinations of cards and enemies who are immune to those cards. While I thankfully didn't run into that situation during my playthrough, I still had an especially terrible experience when Comic appeared in a fight against 6 boos and gave me nothing but E-Cammers. It takes 2 E-Cammer cards to kill 1 boo. That's 12 cards just to finish the fight. But they can also go invisible and I have no way of controlling what I'm targeting. On top of that, I ran out of paint because I had no way of restoring it, making it take even more E-Cammer cards to kill them because now they're unpainted and dealing minimal damage, creating a dismal garbage fight that I don't even have the option to run away from because Comic also got rid of that. Talk about a suck-ass situation. You're forced into these unfun battles out of nowhere, and once you're in, there's nothing you can do to get out unless you win. If you saved recently, half the time you're better off just reloading the game instead of putting up with this. Like, seriously? A situation where I'm expected to lose at least 15 cards just to get through a battle isn't worth my time or the coins I get from winning. The fact that it will give you combinations you can't even win is such an obvious oversight. I have a hard time believing the developers put much thought into adding these to the game. No one wants to waste their resources, but because cards are expendable, the game doesn't care if you do. Color Splash is a little too eager to blindside you into cruddy situations, and at times will even throw game overs at you for the smallest screw-ups. Number 4, Cryptic Moments and Padding. As an adventure game, not everything's going to click right away, but some of the cryptic moments in Color Splash feel almost deliberately so, and can be a hassle to get through because of that. The aforementioned game over moments are a decent example, but thankfully save blocks are almost always placed right before them, though the moving elevator in Kiwano Temple's a cheap one for having no way of knowing ahead of time where the rocks will pop up. As far as cryptic goes though, nothing tops the stake battle, one of the most infamous parts of Color Splash demanding you hit it with your hammer very precisely, and use 3 things in the correct order all within the span of 3 turns. This is a very easy sequence to mess up if you don't strike the stake correctly, and if it's not perfect, subsequent attempts can be costly. It can be maddeningly trial and error, but even though it's not too hard to figure out, it's practically designed for failure on your first attempt, which can be frustrating. The biggest failure of the Thing system is the frozen magnifying glass. You'd think in a game with a dedicated ice pick that would be the answer, but it actually wants the hairdryer to be freed. If the ice pick wasn't going to be the solution, it shouldn't have been included in the game in the first place. It makes it feel less like problem solving and more like reading the developer's mind. Helping the Toad Ghosts in the Dark Blue Inn is actually timed. You have to help them all before the clock strikes 3 and everything resets. If you're not sure how to help one, you'll end up having to help them all over again, every time the clock resets, which can be exhausting. This brings me to my next point, how Color Splash pads out its content. Going back to Kiwano Temple, this is one of my least favorite areas in the game because you have to play through the whole thing twice, only to grab a different mini paint star at the end. This is a slow, tedious level to play through because you have to use these octagons to move around. It also has a few unavoidable battles, as well as the moving elevator portion you can't complete any faster. It feels feels deliberate to put 2 stars at the end of this one just to get more use out of a linear level. Moss Rock Theater similarly has 3 mini paint stars at the end, and is also mostly made up of enemy spam. It's another level that feels stretched out. The bonus round of Sniff It or With It has to be completed for a thing that's necessary later on, but considering you have to play a perfect game for the reward, and you'll even get a game over for messing up, most players are unlikely to do the whole thing the first time through, assuming the bonus prize won't be something necessary later. If you get everything the first time through, that's great, but as is, it's a time-consuming game most players are going to have to do twice, and that feels intentional. Finally, although this museum's more user-friendly than sticker stars, it's also a lot less charming. Worse though is how much more grindy it is. Considering almost every basic enemy has a card to donate, you really have to go out of your way to finish this. And even though the concept artwork's nice, it's not at all worth the time this takes to complete. It's not the only grind for completion in Color Splash either. Number 5, Rochambeau Temples. Rochambeau Temples, another cut and dry, terrible idea in Color Splash. 8 of these temples, in fact, contests of rock, paper, scissors to get unique boss cards for the museum, as well as open up a banner and break the game's economy. Rock, paper, scissors is a game of RNG. Thankfully, not all of the rounds are completely random. You can get hints on opponents for patterns they're likely to use. Most of the basic opponents are easy to defeat because of this, but unfortunately, every temple ends with the rock, paper, wizard, which is a complete RNG check, and necessary to beat for the boss cards. This is an insanely tedious side activity. The last temple's especially awful as all 3 opponents are RNG checks. As is, 100% completing Color Splash isn't without frustration, thanks to how obnoxious these temples are to deal with. On top of this, if you fail to defeat the wizard, you can't retry right away. You have to arbitrarily collect a paint star in a level for another opportunity, adding loading times to the process and only making it more monotonous. These temples are just miserable to engage with. There's nothing interesting about the temples, each one looks identical. Messing up creates a tedious process of loading out and back in, unless you pay this toad on the side, but then all of the opponents are completely random. Get the hell out of here with this place. Rochambeau isn't fun to play and only makes the completionist experience unappealing. There's no reason this terrible side event should have been stretched to 8 different places. It's an obviously bad idea that wasn't worth including. But that does it for Color Splash. Looking at my complaints, some of this game's ideas could have used a lot more thought. Several of its design choices are aggravating, and at the expense of the player. Despite these low points, Paper Mario Color Splash has a lot to offer. It can be an up and down kind of experience, especially your first time through, but it really feels like an adventure filled with funny moments and surprises. Even though it's still lacking in several ways, it's an improvement over Sticker Star, and is a much more compelling game. I can certainly see why someone might not like it for its shortcomings, but if you have an open mind and appreciate variety and an off-the-wall tone, there's a really fun time here. Thank you all so much for watching. If you liked my video, subscribe to my channel and consider supporting my work on Patreon. Thank you so much to my patrons for all of your support. I'll see you next time.